Judith wore a simple navy dress to the charity gala. The event coordinator saw her comfortable shoes, her modest outfit, and called security. "This is a $500 dinner, sweetheart." Judith was removed from the lobby in front of elegantly dressed guests. What they didn't know? She was the anonymous donor who'd funded the charity for 20 years. $5 million. And upstairs, an empty chair waited to honor her. Judith Brennan stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the front of her navy dress. The fabric was soft, familiar. She'd bought it 6 years ago for her nephew's wedding. Simple cut, modest hemline, the kind of dress that didn't demand attention. Her fingers found the pearl earrings in her jewelry box. Small, understated. Richard had given them to her on their 10th anniversary, back when they were still learning how to be comfortable with money, before the insurance company had grown into something bigger than either of them had imagined. She studied her reflection. 74 years old, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, comfortable, low-heeled shoes because her feet couldn't handle an evening in anything else. Her small black purse held her reading glasses, a tissue, and the invitation letter she'd received 3 weeks ago. The letter sat on her dresser now. Cream cardstock, elegant script. "You are cordially invited to the 20th annual Hearts for Children Gala. This year, we honor our anonymous benefactor, whose generosity has transformed countless young lives." Judith had read it a dozen times. 20 years. Had it really been that long? 20 years of quarterly checks from the JMB Trust. 20 years of her lawyer, Martin, handling the paperwork so her name stayed hidden. 20 years of reading the charity's newsletters and seeing what her money had built. The pediatric wing, the mobile clinic, the nursing scholarships, without ever being thanked. She hadn't needed thanks. That was the point. But this year, something had shifted. Maybe it was turning 74. Maybe it was the loneliness that crept in during evenings when the house felt too quiet. Maybe she just wanted to see, once, what her money had actually done. See the faces, hear the stories. So she'd called a cab, put on her navy dress, and now she was going. The Grandview Hotel rose 12 stories above downtown, its facade glowing with warm light. Judith paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, watching elegantly dressed couples glide through the revolving doors, women in floor-length gowns, men in tuxedos, the kind of formal wear Judith had never felt comfortable in, even when Richard was alive, and they could have afforded anything. She took a breath and walked inside. The lobby gleamed. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a grand staircase sweeping upward. Signs directed guests toward the ballroom. Hearts for Children Gala, second floor. Judith followed the signs. Her comfortable shoes made soft sounds against the marble. Around her, other guests moved in clusters. Jewels glittered at throats and wrists. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. At the top of the stairs, double doors stood open. Music drifted out. Through the entrance, Judith could see the ballroom, round tables draped in white linens, centerpieces of roses and candles, a stage at the far end. A young woman stood just outside the doors. Sleek black dress, clipboard, headset. Her hair was pulled back severely, her makeup perfect. She was checking names against a list, greeting guests with practiced warmth. Judith approached. "Excuse me, I'm here for the gala." The young woman looked up. Her smile was automatic, professional. Then her gaze traveled down, taking in Judith's simple navy dress, her comfortable shoes, her small purse. The smile thinned slightly. "Sweetheart, I think you might be in the wrong place. This is a private charity gala." Judith blinked. "I know. I was invited." The woman's expression shifted into patient skepticism. She glanced at her clipboard. "This is a $500 per plate dinner. Do you have your ticket?" Judith's hand went to her purse. "I have the invitation letter. I—" She stopped. The letter was sitting on her dresser at home. She'd forgotten to bring it. "I left it at home," Judith admitted. but I received an invitation from Robert Hastings, the executive director. The young woman, her name tag read, Amanda Westfield, event coordinator, exchanged a glance with someone wearing a security uniform nearby. "Ma'am," Amanda said gently, "I'm sure there's been some confusion. Perhaps you're looking for a different event?" "No," Judith replied quietly. "This is the right event. Hearts for Children." Amanda's patience was wearing thin. Judith could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the clipboard. "Without a ticket, I can't admit you," Amanda explained. Her voice had taken on the careful tone people use with the elderly. With those, they assume are confused. Around them, other guests moved past. A woman in a silver gown glanced at Judith, then away. A man in a tuxedo smirked slightly. "Let me help you find where you need to be," Amanda suggested. She reached out, her hand closing gently but firmly around Judith's elbow. Judith felt heat creep up her neck. Not anger, embarrassment. The particular shame of being dismissed, of being seen as a problem to be managed. "Please," Judith started, "if you could just check with Mr. Hastings." Amanda was already guiding her back toward the stairs, away from the ballroom doors, away from the music and the laughter and the event Judith had come to see. "I'm sure we can sort this out in the lobby," Amanda murmured. The security guard had moved closer, not threatening exactly, just present, just in case. Judith allowed herself to be led. What else could she do? Cause a scene. Insist she belonged when everything about her appearance suggested otherwise. She'd spent 20 years being invisible. Maybe that was all she knew how to be. They descended the stairs. Judith's hand gripped the railing. Behind her, she could hear the ballroom filling with voices. The evening beginning without her. In the lobby, Amanda released her elbow. Her expression had softened into something like sympathy. "I'm sorry for the confusion," Amanda offered. "But we have to be careful. You understand?" Judith nodded. She did understand. She understood exactly. She turned toward the exit, toward the revolving doors, and the cab she'd need to call, and the navy dress she'd put on with such hope 2 hours ago. "Mrs. Brennan?" The voice came from behind her. Male. Urgent. Judith turned. A man in his late 50s was hurrying down the grand staircase, salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a tuxedo that looked slightly uncomfortable on him, like he was more at home in casual clothes. Robert Hastings. She recognized him from the charity's newsletters, the executive director who'd been running Hearts for Children for 15 years, who'd written her annual thank you letters to the JMB Trust without knowing who actually read them. "Mrs. Brennan," Robert repeated, reaching the lobby floor. His face was pale. "You came. I'm so honored." Amanda stood frozen beside Judith, her hands still slightly extended from where she'd been guiding the older woman toward the exit. Robert's gaze moved between them, between Judith's simple navy dress and Amanda's sleek black one, between the woman being escorted out and the coordinator who'd been doing the escorting. His expression shifted. Understanding. Horror. "Amanda," he said carefully, "do you know who this is?" Amanda shook her head. Her confidence had begun to crack. Robert took a breath. "This is Judith Brennan." He paused, letting the name sit. When Amanda's face remained blank, he continued. "The JMB Trust." "Still nothing." "She's our anonymous donor," Robert explained. His voice had gone very quiet, very controlled. "She's funded this charity for 20 years. She's given us $5 million. She's the reason we exist." Amanda's hand, still slightly extended, dropped to her side like she'd been burned. The lobby had gone quiet. The elegantly dressed guests, who'd been milling about, waiting for the ballroom doors to open fully, had turned to watch. Robert moved to Judith's side. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "It's all right," Judith murmured. Her throat felt tight. "No," Robert insisted. "It's not." He turned to Amanda. His expression wasn't angry, exactly, just deeply disappointed. This is the woman we're honoring tonight. The empty chair at the head table. That's for her. Amanda's face had lost all color. I I didn't know. She looked like She stopped, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air anyway. She looked like she didn't belong. Robert extended his arm to Judith. Please, let me take you upstairs. The ceremony is about to begin. Judith hesitated. Around her, the lobby full of wealthy donors stared. Some looked embarrassed, others curious. A few whispered behind their hands. She could leave. Call that cab. Go home to her quiet house and her familiar rooms and continue being invisible the way she'd been for 2 decades. But something in her resisted. Some small, stubborn part that had put on the navy dress and the pearl earrings and decided, just once, to be seen. All right, she agreed quietly. Robert guided her up the grand staircase. Behind them, Amanda stood motionless, her clipboard hanging forgotten at her side. The ballroom was full now, every seat taken, conversations creating a gentle roar of sound. At the front of the room, a head table sat on a raised platform. 5 chairs, 4 of them occupied by board members Judith recognized from photos. The 5th chair, in the center, the place of honor, sat empty. A small plaque rested on the empty place setting, in grateful recognition of our anonymous benefactor. Robert led Judith through the tables. People turned to watch. Their gazes traveled over her simple dress, her comfortable shoes. Confusion rippled through the crowd. At the head table, Robert pulled out the empty chair. Mrs. Brennan, he murmured. Your seat. Judith sat. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them in her lap. The board members greeted her warmly, though she could see the questions in their eyes. Who was this elderly woman in the modest navy dress? Why was she sitting in the chair meant for their mysterious benefactor? Robert moved to the podium. The room gradually quieted. Good evening, he began. His voice carried over the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight. For 20 years, we've gathered to celebrate the work of Hearts for Children. And for 20 years, we've been supported by an anonymous donor whose generosity has been the foundation of everything we do. Judith's chest tightened. Tonight, Robert continued, I'm honored to finally introduce you to that donor. She's been anonymous not out of a desire for privacy, but out of genuine humility, out of a belief that the work matters more than recognition. He gestured toward Judith. This is Judith Brennan. For 20 years, she's given us $250,000 annually, $5 million total. That's more than half of our operating budget over 2 decades. The room erupted, not with polite applause, but with something deeper. Gasps, exclamations. A few people stood. Robert raised his hand for quiet. The pediatric wing that bears no name, Mrs. Brennan funded it. The mobile clinic serving 3 rural counties, Mrs. Brennan. The nursing scholarship program that's trained 47 pediatric nurses, Mrs. Brennan. More people were standing now. The applause built like a wave. Judith sat very still. Tears pricked at her eyes. She'd spent 20 years imagining what this moment might feel like, being thanked, being known, and had convinced herself she didn't need it. But sitting here, hearing her name spoken aloud, feeling the gratitude roll toward her from hundreds of people whose lives her money had touched, she needed it more than she'd known. The standing ovation lasted 2 full minutes. When it finally quieted, Robert invited Judith to the podium. She stood on shaking legs, walked to the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar from newsletters, most not. I didn't come here tonight expecting this, she began. Her voice was soft, but the microphone carried it. I came because I wanted to see. After 20 years of writing checks, I wanted to see the faces, the real people my money had helped. She paused, glanced down at her navy dress. I know I don't look like what you expected. She smiled slightly. I don't look like someone who can write $250,000 checks. But My late husband built a successful company, and when he died, he left me more money than I could ever spend on myself." Her voice strengthened. "So I spent it on children who needed medical care, on families who couldn't afford it, on a charity that does the work I never could do myself." She looked at Robert. "Thank you for honoring me. But the real honor is getting to be part of this, getting to know that somewhere a child is breathing easier, or walking steadier, or smiling brighter because of what we've built together." The applause came again, softer this time, more intimate. As Judith returned to her seat, she caught sight of Amanda standing at the back of the ballroom. The young woman's face was stricken. Tears streaked her perfect makeup. After the ceremony, after the dinner Judith barely tasted, after dozens of people approached to thank her with shining eyes, Judith found Amanda waiting near the exit. "Mrs. Brennan," Amanda whispered, "I'm so sorry. I judged you. I assumed—" She couldn't finish. Judith reached out, touched Amanda's arm gently. "You were protecting the event, making sure only invited guests got in." "But I didn't ask," Amanda breathed. "I didn't give you a chance to explain. I just saw your dress and your shoes, and I decided you didn't belong." Judith nodded slowly. "Assumptions are easy. Questions are harder. But they're worth asking." Amanda wiped at her eyes. "I'll do better. I promise." "I believe you," Judith replied. As she left the Grandview Hotel that night, in the same navy dress, the same comfortable shoes, Judith felt different, lighter, visible in a way she hadn't been for 20 years. The next day, she called Robert. "I've been thinking," she told him, "about staying anonymous, about hiding." Robert was quiet, listening. "I don't want to hide anymore," Judith continued. "I want people to see that generosity doesn't require evening gowns, that giving isn't about looking wealthy. It's about being willing." So she gave openly after that, attended the charity events, met the families whose children her money had helped, learned their names, heard their stories, and when people asked why she wore simple dresses to fancy galas, she smiled. "Because this is who I am," she'd say, "and the work doesn't need me to be anyone else." The money kept flowing, the children kept healing, and Judith Brennan, in her modest navy dress and comfortable shoes, finally stepped into the light she'd been casting for 20 years. Not as revenge, not as vindication, just as herself. Finally, completely, gratefully herself.